Morning, I'm Justin Morgenroth, and I'm going to be presenting to you today on site species matching with durable eucalypts. So thanks for inviting me to speak to this group. It's an exciting opportunity to tell you about some of the research that we've been involved with here at the School of Forestry for the last few years. And though I'm presenting to you, this is really on behalf of a much larger research group, including myself, Professor Ewan Mason, Dean Meeson at Scion, Mark Bloomberg, an adjunct here at the University of Canterbury, as well as some postgraduate students, namely Siraja Selikan, who is now graduated with his PhD. He's actually working with Dean Meeson at Scion. We've got Daniel Bochniewicz, who's currently doing his PhD with myself and Ewan Mason, and Tyson Lee, who graduated with a master's a couple of years ago and has returned home. In any case, as I say, this is a really nice opportunity to be able to share our research with you. So thanks for joining us. So I'll start sharing my screen, and you can follow along with the presentation that way. Okay, there we go. So as I say, I'll be presenting to you my site species matching research with durable eucalypts on behalf of a much larger research group. So essentially, what we're doing here is trying to better match the species that we plant to sites within a given set of environmental constraints. And what we want to do is provide growers with alternative species that they can plant for different end uses and to match specific environmental constraints, I suppose. And a lot of the research that we're doing is to basically describe a set of key characteristics, things like growth and yield, survival, heartwood or sapwood formation, across a range of sites that have varying environmental characteristics. So this is essentially what it's all about. This is one of our sites. It represents a reasonably small site with Eucalyptus globoidea planted. It's age 6 Eucalyptus globoidea. And as you can see from the image, there's a range of I guess, survivals as well as growth rates. So of the ones that have survived, there are heights in there ranging from roughly 0.5 meter to 4.5 meters at age 6. You can also see a range of, I guess, topographic conditions, a range of aspects and slopes, as well as a small range of elevations. So those topographic conditions create different soil moisture availabilities, create different amounts of radiation interception. Just in general, they create different growing conditions for a species, and we wanted to understand how Eucalyptus globoidea and some of the other durable eucs responded to these siting effects. So PhD student Siraja Selikan, well, I should say PhD graduate Siraja Selikan, who's now working at Scion, undertook the vast majority of this research. And one of his outcomes was to basically look at height growth in response to some of these different environmental characteristics. So the first species that he looked at was Eucalyptus globoidea. And what he found with Eucalyptus globoidea was that at high levels of topographic exposure, where you might expect a high degree of wind, then the trees exhibited the least height growth. So trees grew shorter when they were exposed to high levels of wind. Another result that he came up with was that when Eucalyptus globoidea was planted in a concave topographic position, it also exhibited lower height growth. And then finally, he found that Eucalyptus globoidea planted on the mid-slope, so not at the top of a ridge, not necessarily at the bottom of a valley, but sort of in the middle there in the mid-slopes, those had the greatest height growth. So taken together, what this suggests is that Eucalyptus globoidea is certainly intolerant of wind. It doesn't like that exposure to winds. And also it's intolerant of high soil moisture or potentially frosts in gullies or depressions or low down in valleys as well. So globoidea is not a species to grow in your valleys, not a species to grow in areas prone to frosts, because it simply doesn't exhibit, I guess, a great height growth response to those conditions. What about Eucalyptus basistoana? So basistoana exhibited some similarities to globoidea in that it also did not like exposure to wind, but in contrast to Eucalyptus globoidea, basistoana preferred concave topographic positions. And it also preferred being grown on toe slopes. So what this suggests is that while it's intolerant of the windy conditions, it actually has a greater water requirement, or at least a greater tolerance to soil moisture relative to Eucalyptus globoidea. Sirajus also looked at the influence of siting on survival. And ultimately what he found with this study was that Eucalyptus basistoana showed greater rates of survival than did Eucalyptus globoidea. And he showed that Eucalyptus globoidea mortality increased in hollows or gullies or deep in valleys as well. And this again makes us think that it's possibly intolerant of wet feet, so wet conditions, or potentially frosts in those gullies or hollows as well. Together, Sirajus's research produced the ability to develop these growth and yield models. So he's been able to essentially measure the mean top height in the basal area for a variety of different plots for globoidea across the country. The measured data are the black lines, and then he's been able to model that as well. So the blue lines represent the model data. Now, what's been nice, I guess, is that Professor Ewan Mason's been able to take those results and turn them into a product that anybody can use. So I'm just going to click on this link here, and that's going to bring up a web page. I'll have to change my screen sharing so you can see that as well. So let me just change that. There we go. Okay, so now I'm hopeful that you're seeing a website that shows growth and yield for Eucalyptus globoidea. And what it allows us to do is enter some starting values, and then that will model the volume that you can expect from that particular species. So let's start with a starting age of 4, a mean top height of 5 meters, a basal area per hectare, also 5 meters, stocking of 1,000 stems per hectare, and a final age of 25 years. And then we'll introduce some thinning regimes as well. So let's create a thin at, let's see, 7 years down to, let's say 700 stems. And then again at 15 years down to 400 stems. So we'll register those thins. And then if we click on go, we end up with this, this growth and yield table that shows age and years in the first column, expected mean top height, basal area, and volume as well, down to age 25. So this is a nice little tool that anybody can play around with, and it's based on the modeled results of Sirajus's research for globoidea. So I will go back to sharing the PowerPoint presentation. Here we go. So what's the benefit to growers? Well, essentially the research was designed to better inform growers about the various factors that are influencing durable eucalyptus survival, growth, and yield. And I think we've got a better understanding for at least Eucalyptus globoidea and basistoana now as to where we should be siting them. And then the secondary objective, I guess, is that with the tool, the online tool that was developed by Ewan Mason, we can give growers more certainty around expected growth and yield. So on to the next little bit of research. That previous research was limited in a sense by the lack of PSPs around the country, and essentially the lack of environmental variability in the existing PSP network. So what master's student Tyson Lee did was he basically performed a desktop exercise, a GIS-based analysis, where he looked at where we could strategically expand the PSP, the Permanent Sample Plot Network, for globoidea and Basistoana. And so what you see is a couple of different maps there, on the left for globoidea, on the right for Basistoana. And what it shows is the current permanent sample plots, those little blue dots, and areas where we should try to establish new permanent sample plots for each of those species, based on the assumption that we want new permanent sample plots to have different environmental conditions than the existing plots. So you can see the dark green areas in either of those maps. Those are areas where we should try to strategically expand our PSP network to establish permanent sample plots in environmental conditions that are not currently represented by the existing permanent sample plot network. So this is really going to inform where we establish our new permanent sample plots, such that future studies will benefit from the full range of potential growing conditions. So up to maybe last year, we'd undertaken all of that research. Those results on preliminary survival, growth, and yield, those were important first results. But we wanted to better understand stem volume and taper. And Heartwood description was also a key product because of its durability. So with that in mind, PhD student Daniel Bociniewicz came along, and he basically undertook a data collection program where he visited a variety of different sites around the country, and he destructively sampled 74 trees across a range of age and sizes. And you can see the types of forests he was working in, the samples that he collected there in the top right image, the logs that he'd felled in the bottom left, and bottom right, what you see is the heartwood stained in each of those discs. So here's a brief sort of description of those destructively sampled trees at those 7 sites. You can see diameter breast height along the x-axis, height along the y-axis, and you can see a good range of tree sizes that he has successfully acquired data from. And what he's been able to do with that data, he's been working quite extensively with Professor Mason to develop these compatible models that basically describe the volume of heartwood, the volume of sapwood, the total wood volume, the volume of bark for these sample trees. So these are just 3 specific examples. We see tree number 18, tree number 4, and tree number 45. And you can basically see the heartwood in that sort of dark red line, the total wood in that sort of orangish line, and then the bark in the pink colored line. So you can see these basically more detailed descriptions of the wood that you're going to get given different sizes of trees. So what we've then turned that into is basically a little Excel spreadsheet that you can type in a variety of starting values into. So you type in a height and diameter. So for example, over here on the left, you have a tree of 35 meters in height with a 45 centimeter diameter, and that predicts a total heartwood volume of 0.78 cubic meters, a total sapwood volume of 0.42 cubic meters, which together add up to 1.2 cubic meters. You've got a total bark volume of 3/4 of a cubic meter, and the total volume as a whole is 1.97 cubic meters. So you get a rough idea of the breakdown of different products that you can expect from a given felled log. So what are we trying to do here? How is that of benefit to growers? Well, basically it gives growers a greater understanding of how much total wood they're going to get, how much sapwood they're going to get, how much heartwood they can expect to get, given a particular height and DBH measurement. Things that we're currently working on and we'll be working on over the coming summer are to determine siting effects on heartwood formation. So there's some suggestion that depending on the site characteristics, the amount of heartwood formation may differ, and that's something we'd like to experiment with. So we'd like to try to understand that relationship a little bit better. So we're going to characterize some sites, we're going to collect some cores and undertake measurement of those cores for heartwood and sapwood volume, and then we're going to model the effects of those site characteristics on heartwood formation. So that's my presentation. Hope you enjoyed it. Those are my details. Feel free to get in touch if you've got any follow-up questions. All the best. I'll stop sharing now and end the presentation.